Okay, happy Friday to everybody. So we are going to be talking about, once again, the main enemy. Whoever that president was, I forget who it was, but he was absolutely right when he said, we have nothing to fear but fear itself. And I'm going to be explaining to you how fear creates worldwide problems. And so indulging in your own fear, how that can have that butterfly effect if what you want to do is be able to be somebody who helps the world. When you indulge in fear, there's that butterfly effect that goes out and it can create, world havoc. Apocalypse. That the fear of the apocalypse will in fact bring it upon you. In our lives, just, getting through your basic everyday survival of life, fear is, in my estimation, the most overindulged emotion that we have, and it is responsible, I would say, for everything in terms of the negatives in our life. And I'm not just talking about the new age. You're either in fear or you're in love, because a lot of people who go in that direction are also operating out of fear, but they're masking it with a false sense of love and light and happiness and everything's beautiful and I just love everybody. That is actually coming out of fear a lot of times as well. So I'm going to be explaining to you what creates fear, and more importantly, how you can get rid of it, because fear is what keeps you trapped. If there's one thing, it's fear. Now, the reality is that many of us have survived very traumatic experiences and events in our lives. And so the result of that is that we are in a continuous state of self-preservation mode. Now, don't get me wrong, fear has its place. Without fear, we couldn't function. Because we do live in a limited three-dimensional world, and things happen. And in three-dimensional physical reality, we do have things that can end your life, that can be a threat to your health, to your satisfaction, your happiness. And so fear definitely is something that we need, but it's sort of like the brakes on your car. The brakes on your car are extremely important. Without them, you could crash. But, if you have your foot on the brake the whole time, the car just simply won't go. So it's kind of like that. And I remember I've been in the car with people who drove with both feet, where they have one foot on the brake and one on the gas all the time. And it's horrible. I'm trying to, if you're in the back seat, if somebody drives like that, it's just, it's a horrible way to drive. There's a lot of people who live their life like that. And you're burning out the gears and you're burning out the brakes all the time, because you've got your foot on the gas and your foot on the brake all at the same time. And, it's a good way to... Actually, as I think about it, that is a really good metaphor for what aging is. When you look at somebody who looks old, if I were to let my hairs grow out, you would see, how old I am, because you'd see nothing but gray down here. You'd see a lot of gray and a bald spot up here. That would definitely add some years to my looks, but I'm still doing pretty good for my age, and one of them is that I just have made a commitment never to stress about anything. And I've been in some really dire situations in my life, and I've just, not that stress hasn't made its appearance in my life, because it has. I've talked about that, but I made a decision in my 20s when I was in the hospital with a kidney stone. The kidney stone was so big they had to climb up inside my hoo-ha, and then chop it up, and then I had to, be in recovery with tubes coming out of all kinds of places that tubes should not be coming out of. And I was in a lot of pain, and I remember looking up at the ceiling going, I am never going to stress out about anything ever again, because I knew that stress is what got me there. Stress is just a fancy way of, prolonged state of fear. That's all stress is. That's all anxiety is. I'm feeling some anxiety right now. You know, we minimize things. You know, anxiety is a prolonged state of fear. And so fear is what, in my opinion, it's the biggest enemy that we have, is fear. And yet we live in a society that promotes fear. Everything that you're sold on television and on the internet, on Facebook, is done through fear. This is what one of the first things you learn in sales is that the first thing you learn in sales is you identify the problem. Oh my gosh, did you know that there are X amount of people every day who are dying from such and such disease? And blah, blah, blah. We live in a society where we're constantly being by radio waves and blah, 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 blah. How do we get out of it? Product X will heal you of all problems related to this very serious problem. Fear. And then you rush out to go buy product X because now you're in this state of fear. So the other thing that is extremely important, perhaps most important to understand in this age of information, I laugh because the amount of actual information, factual information that is disseminated is about this much. The rest of it is all nonsense. In this age of information, being in a state of fear makes you incredibly susceptible to manipulation and to being deceived. And that's because we have this body and we have this brain. Now, my ancestors, the ancient Germanic people, they called human beings man. M-A-N-N is how we would spell it now, man. And that is where we get our word man, which now means male human, but that's not accurate. Originally, man meant both male and female, it meant human. And what is man? Man is mind. It's the ancient pronunciation for mind. It is also the name of the first human. The first human, his name was Manuj. And that is also in the Vedic as well. What do they call him? Manu. Manu was his name. The first human being that ever existed. What does that mean? It's not Adam. It's not the first person that was put on the planet. It means that the essence of being human is mind. And what is mind? Mind is another word for the moon. The original word for moon in the Germanic was man. We have it in Old Norse mani, and the god Mani, which means the moon. What does the moon do? The moon reflects the light of the sun. What is the word for sun? The word for sun is Sawul. What is Sawul? Sawul is the ancient pronunciation for the word soul. In fact, we have it in our English, S-O-U-L. That's why it's spelled S-O-U-L, Sawul. Sawul. You have the spirit and you have the mind. You have the sun and you have the moon. These are the two luminaries in the sky, regardless of you flat earthers out there that want to give me that nonsense about flat earth and it's a disk powered from the... I don't give a crap about that. You do have these two luminaries that tell us whether it's night and day and, tell us how the seasons and the months and all of that. Month comes from moon. You have the sun and the moon, the soul and the mind. We are mind. We are not soul. If we were Sawul, we would be out of the body. We would be spirits floating around doing whatever spirits do. We are not Sawul. We are man. We are mind. Our job is to reflect the light of the soul. You cannot do any of those things if you are in fear. We have, if you want to talk about the brain, we have 3 brains. We have the human brain, right, which is the frontal cortex, the outer part of the brain, which is the last part of the brain that has evolved. We have the mammalian brain, which is in the center, which is the emotional response. And then you have the ancient brain, which is the reptilian brain. Why do you think people are so afraid of reptilians? Why do you think people are looking for reptilians everywhere? Why do you think that there is this huge, incredibly popular idea that reptilians are running the world and we are victims of the reptilian overlord? Why do you think that is? It's because there's truth to it. The truth is that you are being controlled by your reptilian brain, especially if you live in fear. Have you ever known any person who has believed in reptilians who is not a very fearful, anxious person and is constantly finding the conspiracy in everything? Because they're living in their reptilian brainstem. That's why they're so into reptilians. They're really afraid of their own brainstem. So we could talk about that. We have talked about that. But what I'm here to do today is to point out to you what fear really is. So fear is more than just being in abject terror. Fear is a bunch of other things as well. So let me list those for you. I've got a little list here. Let me see which one it is. So here are some, what's the word I want to look for? Here are some symptoms that you are living in a state of fear. Anxiety. We have a whole medical, huge amount of, my brain isn't working very well today. We have this whole category of drugs for anxiety and sleep. How many people complain of not being able to get enough sleep? You can't sleep when you're in a state of anxiety. So people who can't sleep, even if you were to say, oh no, I'm fine, I'm very well, nothing scares me. If you're in this constant state of low-level anxiety to the point where you can't sleep at night, you can't shut your brain off, that's because you're in a state of fear. What is fear? Fear is survival mode. If you're on the battlefield, where ninjas can sneak up on you and kill you in the middle of the night, it is actually helpful to be, not be able to sleep very well, because you need to be awake to be able to deal with whatever threat is coming at you. That's what's happening with people who can't sleep. They don't have ninjas crawling through the windows to kill them in the middle of the night, but yet they can't get enough sleep. This is a sign of living in a state of fear. So I heard something a while ago which I found to be extremely illuminating about fear. And let's see if I can remember it correctly. But the way it goes is this, is that I think they said there are only 3 inborn fears. And those is the fear of heights, like babies. Newborn babies, they have only 3 fears. They're afraid of heights because, they could fall and hurt themselves. They're afraid of loud noises. Something makes a loud noise all of a sudden. That's frightening to them. And the third one is sudden movement. Those are the only 3 fears that are inbred, that your body, that that nature has decided we need to implant these 3 fears into these little beings called humans. Every other fear outside of that is learned. So if you are somebody who has a hard time sleeping at night, if you are somebody who is afraid of the government, you're afraid you're never going to have enough money, you're afraid of the tax collectors, you're afraid, what am I, I'm losing my job, I'm going to be sick and die. If you're running around with these kinds of low-level anxiety all the time, you are in a state of unnatural fear. So fear is dealing with a life-threatening threat. And so it releases all kinds of chemicals which you need in the body in the moment. But to be in a state of prolonged exposure to these chemicals being put into your body, this is what kills you. This is what gives you disease. Okay? So we're going to be talking about how to get out of fear and all of that. But, you know, it's important to understand that because, you know, I don't know, you know, we all attract everything. So I got to ask myself, you know, why have I attracted a lot of this? But, you know, a lot of people who come onto my channel are people who are just racked with fear and racked with problems. And you know, it just really reinforces to me that we live in a world where humans who are designed to be this divine mind on earth, because that's what man means. To be a human being is to be a divine mind on earth which reflects the light of the soul. That can only happen if the upper part of the brain, you know, the frontal cortex, is functioning. That's what it's there for. That's where we have our reasoning capacity. That's where we're able to reason and analyze and understand and contemplate, and to be able to deal with complex thoughts and complex situations and complex ideas. But when you are in fear, you are all the way down into the reptilian brain, which is looking for the life, you know, you're looking for threats. And so everything is black and white. Everything is good or bad. I either want to eat that, or run from it, or fuck it, or kill it, or control it. That's the reptilian brainstem. It's looking for these things. It's also looking for the dangers. So it was something I was watching recently that was, there's a channel out there, in case you're, I don't know, I've never watched it, but I was looking at some of it. It's the NRA channel, the channel for the National Rifle Association. So as you know, the National Rifle Association, besides protecting the Second Amendment, allowing people to bear arms, it is basically a selling machine for the gun companies. And so I was watching one of the people on there. It was actually a woman, a very attractive woman, but she was talking about how that in every city in the United States we have pedophiles, and she's going through the list of all these horrible, life-threatening things. And you know, and the more you listen to her, you know, we have to have an automatic rifle. And I think she went on to say that the most effective weapon to defend your family from pedophiles and all that is to have an automatic rifle. But see, you can't, you know, the whole point of it is fear. Fear is what drives that. That's an extreme example, but you know, everything in our society is I shouldn't say everything. I'm getting black and white here myself. Much of what we talk about, especially when it comes to politics, our politics is driven completely out of fear. Anyway, I could go on and on and on and on. But we are going to be talking about that, and we're going to be talking about what we can do to get to the state where we can actually function from this part of the mind. I'm coming to the conclusion, you know, when I deal with a lot of people and when I watch a lot of people, I'm coming to the conclusion that I would say that the majority of people are not even functioning in their neocortex, that they are functioning in their lower parts of their brain. Because you can't have a discussion with people. Maybe I'll do some comments, because it comes out in the video comments as well. The black and white, fear-based thinking, and the inability to have critical thinking. You've heard me talk about critical thinking before. I have whole videos on critical thinking and what critical thinking is. But you can't even begin to access critical thinking if you are living in fear. Can't do it. Because when you're in a fear state, you're trying to get out of falling off a cliff or something coming at you You know, those three basic fears of falling, loud noises, or, you know, something moving fast at you. Something that can actually kill you in the moment. And that's all that fear is good for. Fear is good for in the moment you're driving your car and somebody slams on their brakes, you go into a state of fear and you slam on the brakes. Or you swerve to avoid something. And then what happens? The danger passes, your heartbeat comes back down, you breathe a little bit more, and well, I'm glad I missed that. Or you flip the guy off, you know, you get out of my way, and then 10 seconds later, 20 seconds later, you calm down, and then you keep driving. If you were in a constant state of that, you wouldn't be able to drive. That's all that fear is good for. Fear is just good for dealing with immediate threats. But if you're spending your whole life thinking about all of the ways that everything and anything can harm you, if you're thinking about all the ways that, you know, you don't have enough of this and you don't have enough of that, you know, even if you're on this level of anxiety where you can't sleep at night, you don't have enough time to enjoy your life, you are in a state of constant, at the very least, low-level fear. And what is irrational about it is that that is really a state where you're looking for a cliff that you're about to fall off of, or some object is flying at you to harm you, or there's some loud noise, which would indicate any one of those things. And if you don't have those three things, there's no reason for you to be in a state of anxiety. And if you are in a state of anxiety, it means that there is a fear that you learned that you are continuously guarding against all the time. And that is irrational. You're not able to think with your actual brain. You can't even begin to think in critical terms. You can't even begin to analyze if something is rational or not. If what somebody is telling you is rational. You can't do it when you're in a state of fear. So we'll talk more about that. So I'm going to take a little bit of a break. I just realized that there was something that I, have been wanting to do. If you want to go and look at my books, you can go to michaelwilliamdenny.com. A lot of people ask about my videos and DVDs. That you can also find by going to, now I've just created a new little subdomain, which is videos.michaelwilliamdenny.com. And that'll take you to a page that will have all of my videos, except for some reason there's a couple of videos there on Amazon that have nothing to do with me that for some reason is connected to my name. So the last two, don't worry about. I don't know what the hell those are. Anyway, so I'm going to do a little bit of that business. I just got a text, so I must look at it and respond because I'm a slave to my devices. And then I'll see if there's anybody online, and then maybe we'll do some Q&A. So I'll be right back. Okay, so before I get to the questions, let me go through that list. This is just a short list of things. Um, one of them I talked about anxiety. So if you have just this free floating anxiety and you're just anxious and you don't know what it is about, you're living in a state of fear. You are waiting for something that's going to snuff your life out. But your conscious mind isn't aware of what it is because that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So you just walk around with this sense of fear, anxiety. Another one, this is chronic in modern society. Now, I consider myself, pretty lazy, and I'm totally proud of it. My motto has been make money doing what you would do anyway. And my other motto is that work is something I do when I'm not doing all the other stuff that I want to do. So, I have a very limited amount of hours that I allow myself to work, and no matter how busy I am, I will not work beyond those. I always make sure I have plenty of downtime. I spend a lot of time relaxing. I spend a lot of time physically exercising and doing things like surfing. And now I've got a new Strand Cruiser. I live on the beach, so I ride my Strand Cruiser around and, go to the gym and enjoy life. That for me is fun. I enjoy that. But there are people that I've known, and certainly I've been in this position earlier in my life, where people just have no spare time. I don't know if it's just me, but maybe I'm wrong about it, but it seems that women are more like this than men. That women just have no spare time in their lives. Never. It is not uncommon, and I'm not kidding you, and I'm not trying to point anybody out or make anybody feel stupid. Know that this is common. This is not just one person I'm trying to single out here, but it is not uncommon for women to tell me when I say, well, why don't you take 10 minutes a day and meditate? And they say, I don't have time. And I go, you serious? You don't have 10 minutes to meditate? No, I don't. At the end of the day, the only time I have maybe 20 minutes to myself at the end of the day. That's all the time that they have. I remember telling my fiance, who she's been gone now a little over 4 months, but she was one of these people too. And we could talk about maybe that was potentially what participated in her disease that killed her. But she, I remember saying, okay, so meditate for 3 minutes. You go, 3 minutes? I don't have 3 minutes. This is not, maybe you're laughing at that, but that is not uncommon. That we fill our lives with so much busy work that we don't have any time. Now, it is impossible. I'm telling you straight out, it is impossible for you to make any progress spiritually if you don't have considerable time to just be with yourself. Your brain has to get rid of all of the unnecessary garbage that it's, this is why we dream. The reason why we dream when we fall asleep is that the mind is sifting through all of the daily events and getting rid of all the stuff that it doesn't need. If you ever notice, like if you're watching television and you go to sleep, you'll dream about the show. It's because you were just watching it. Your brain is sifting through, do I need that information? No. You were walking down the street or you were doing this, you dream that you're walking down the street. It's because your brain is reliving stuff, trying to sift out all the unnecessary information. So that's, again, if you're not getting enough sleep at night, you're not letting your brain do that. If you don't have a significant amount of time every day to just be with yourself, there's no way you're going to be able to look at your life from a rational perspective and be able to consciously think about anything. Now, why is this important? It's because everything in your life is your choice. You have created it. That's why I have to attack any victim mentality. Because what is your first response to you when I say, well, you've got to have more time, you've got to do this? Well, I don't have time for that. Who's going to take care of the kids? Who's going to do the laundry? Who's going to do this? And I've got my business that I got to do, and I don't have time. I got to take care of my husband's this. I got to do that, and there's just, I can't, I'm a victim of that. You've chosen all of that. You've chosen that. Now, why have you chosen that? You have chosen that because what you are looking for is you are looking for ways to avoid being alone with yourself. It's one of the most frightening things that most people in our society deal with. Because when you're left alone with yourself, what's going to happen is all of your feelings are going to come up. All of the feelings that you have. As I teach, as you go through life, you are continuously forced to choose between taking actions that will fulfill your soul, which are usually, an ego eradication process. You got to get rid of your ego to listen to what your soul really wants. And the other choice is to follow doing what other people want you to do. Whether that's the government, whether that's your family, your spouse, your friends, society, television, commercials, the really hot-looking but really angry woman selling you an AR-15. You're trying to meet somebody's expectations, or you're going, you know what, I need to take care of me and I'm going to do what makes me happy. You will not know what makes you happy if you're one of these people that has no time. I just don't have any time. I can't. I don't have time. That's your choice. Let's look at some more things that are connected to a state of living in continuous fear. Alcohol and drugs, addictions, internet. Now, alcohol and drugs is pretty obvious. What are alcohol and drugs? What are they there to do? They are there to stop the the experience of pain, to dull pain. So I mean, like real, I just earlier at the end of, when was it? A year ago? Was it a year ago? Might have been a year ago. Yeah, a year ago I had an operation. I had an inguinal hernia, and they sliced me open and tied things up and sewed me up, and it was fairly major surgery, and they gave me a bottle of pills to take, and I took them so that I could sleep. It was painful. So that's what drugs are there for. They're there to block out pain. Alcohol does the same thing. It's a depressant. I'm going to even go so far as to say the majority of your shamanic power plants are also, you're doing that for the same reason. You're trying to block out unpleasant feelings. The fear, the anxiety. What is one of the reasons that people smoke a lot of weed for? Even from a medical perspective, it's prescribed to people who have anxiety. What is anxiety? You're living in a constant state of fear. So you need something that's going to dull that. So that's pretty obvious. Alcohol and drugs. Addictions of any kind. Whether you're addicted to porn, you're addicted to, I don't care what it is. Whatever, even if you're addicted to physical fitness, there's a lot of people like that. Geez, I could stand to lose probably 20 pounds if I wanted to go and be a bathing suit model. Internet. Internet is one of the most mind-numbing things that, and you're watching me, and the irony is that, this is how I make my living, is by communicating through the internet. But it's one of the most mind-numbing things out there. And it's, let me give you an example, and this has been going on for a while. And I remember when I was living in Idaho, and one of the main things I did for a living is I taught martial arts in person. I had classes of people that I would teach internal martial arts to, and meditation and shamanism. So people actually had to show physically up, because then you have to show them how to move and how to stand and all that kind of stuff. And people would contact me, and they were mostly young people. And again, this was like 10 years ago, 15 years ago. They would contact me and they would say, oh, I want to train in your martial arts. Can I do it via Skype? Like, no, you can't do that. And they'd get very upset with me. Why not? I want to learn this from you, and you should do, number one, there's the whole, the internet has made people, what's that word? It's made people entitled. They have this sense of entitlement because everything is a product that they can buy. and it's up to them. And you are there to allow them to buy a product off of you, and So when I would say no, you can't do that, they would get very upset with me. But besides being entitled, which shows again a lack of being able to think rationally, I would explain to them, I can't teach you unless I'm physically there to be able to alter your posture and your stance. There's just a lot of subtlety there. You can't do that. You have to have the physical interaction with somebody. And they didn't like that, and they didn't understand that. That's the physical interaction with people, talking to people in person, communicating, reacting in person, is one of the things that actually creates connections in the brain and in the nervous system. You can't do it without that. This was, again, 10 years ago, and I remember one of my students who was a high school student, and he was telling me that he had friends who thought that dates meant at 4 o'clock we're going to have a texting date. And the thought of actually going and meeting the girl or the guy in person was too frightening for them, so they would do it via text. It's one of the most mind-numbing things out there. It disconnects us from our body connecting with the actual physical universe, which is necessary for a healthy brain and a healthy mind. So living in the internet, guaranteed, if you live in the internet, you are living in a state of fear, because it creates that, like flame wars. Now, I admit freely, this happens to me. If somebody criticizes me on my channel, I'm the first to jump in there and want to type out get into a flame war with them about it. I'm typical that way, where I avoid the 90% of the people that he praises on me for all that. I'll find the one person that's going to criticize me, and then I'll engage with them. That's So I'm guilty of a lot of this stuff too. It takes one to know one. Let's see, what else do we have in our list here? And this is just arbitrary stuff. There's plenty of other things. How do you know that you're living in fear? Suspicion. You're suspicious of everything and everybody. One of the ways that you live in fear is you control. You want to control everything. You want to control people. How do you know that you're living in control? You say, I'm not a controlling person. You can do whatever you want. I don't have any of that. Well, but do you spend a lot of time trying to figure out how you're going to do this or to do that? I don't have enough money, but if I sit and I figure out what kind of job, and if I can do that, you're spending a lot of time trying to figure out how you're going to have enough of this or have enough of that. That's control, and that's coming out of fear. What is the basis of fear? Fear says that you have a target on you, and this is where victim mentality comes from. That you have a target on you, and everything is out to get you. Now, this isn't your fault. You have been programmed this way. Our society has been programmed to think this way for 2,000 years. This is what Christianity was all about. Why did Christianity come about? Christianity came about because the Roman Empire was looking for ways to consolidate their conquered lands, which were the barbarians, which was anybody who lived, outside of, central Rome, basically was a barbarian. They lived in family units. They lived in shamanic awareness, which meant that they lived in direct access to their physical surroundings, which meant they were nature worshipers, which is, in order to get along with nature, you have to assume that nature is going to provide for you. They didn't have supermarkets where you went and killed and slaughtered or, harvested all of these crops and then stuck them in these giant, enormous supermarkets where you could just go and get whatever you wanted. You had to be in connection with it, which meant if there was drought, if there was famine, if there was fire, pestilence, you might not be able to eat. Now, you can't live in that state of, my gosh, is there going to be a fire and pestilence? You can't live like that. So you have to live in a state of trust. This is why they worshipped nature. They worshipped Mother Earth and knew that Mother Earth would provide for them and take care of them. Now, for Rome to be able to consolidate its conquered territories, you have to have a means of controlling these people who, by their instinct, are not looking to be controlled. They're looking to live in a state of fluid interdependence with the spiritual realm and the physical realm. So you have to put fear into them. This is why you introduce this monotheist God who sits up there in heaven and points down and says, you are born in sin and you are going to be burned in hell because you offend me with your very existence. And what does this mean? This is a perfect sales pitch. What is the first thing you do when you sell a product to somebody? You show them the problem. And then you hype up the problem with fear. If you don't get this, this is a big problem, you're about to die, there are things that are coming after you, or you're about to get this disease, or you need something, I have the perfect solution. Buy product X. So product X is Jesus, because Jesus says, hey, don't worry about it. He's really angry at you. Imagine, this is the dialogue. Jesus comes to you and he says, listen, God the Father, Mr. Yahweh, he's my dad, I love him, but holy crap, he's got a serious temper, he's a perfectionist. He created you and everything, but there's these flaws, drives him crazy. He's so pissed at you. He can't stand you, he wants to destroy you. He wants to not just destroy you, he wants to punish you eternally. He's going to throw you into this place called, the everlasting fires of torment, and he's going to keep you there. So you might want to just stay away from him, but you know what? I'll take the heat for you. He loves me. He likes me. I know how to talk to him. I'll take the heat for you. I'll let him punish me instead. And, if you could kind of worship me for the rest of your life, that'd be kind of cool. And then you'll be okay. And so what do Christians do? They spend the rest of their lives talking about how horrible they are, how sinful they are, and how grateful they are that Jesus died for them. And so they're in a constant state of fear and guilt. This is why this was imposed upon the world, starting with Europe, because they had all these barbarians they had to control through fear. It's a political tool. What is the main source that drives political votes? Forgive me for saying it. I don't care which side of the aisle you're on. Why did Donald Trump get elected? Because people were full of fear. Somebody's going to take away my guns. They're going to take away family values. We need somebody to come in there and deal with the immigration threat of all these immigrants and these foreigners that are coming in. We need to deal. Somebody has to come in. It was fear. Again, I don't care which side you're on. You'd be lying to me if you don't admit that. If you are a Republican and you voted for him and you thought he was great, you can't look me in the eyes and tell me you weren't scared to death of the threat of the Democrats who want to take away your freedom, who want to tax you to death. It's fear. Fear is the greatest political tool that has ever been used. And so we have been hypnotized and we are being controlled through fear. The most frightening thing to a political system is people who can think for themselves without reacting. Right? Because the other thing is to go in the exact opposite direction and be a terrorist or to be an anarchist, which is again operating from the same, you're just on the opposite side of the spectrum. But to be there and to live in it and not let it control you and not be afraid, that is the most frightening thing, because you can't control a person who can rationally think for themselves. And I have to say, this is probably one of the most important things that I'm trying to bring to people. Everything that I teach, whether it's Qigong or whether it's meditation or mantra or ritual, is so that it will get you up into the upper portions of your brain so you can think for yourself without being afraid, and then nobody will be able to control you. And more importantly than that, not only will people not be able to control you, you will be able to determine your life. You'll be able to intend your exact reality. regardless of what's happening, regardless of how bad the economy is, or how bad the taxes are, or how bad this, or how bad that, you will still be able to intend your reality. On the contrary side of it, if things are perfect, and everything was perfect, and the economy was perfect, if you're living in a state of fear, you're only going to create more constriction. You're going to create more things that will trap you. We could go into all of those ways, but that'll take us forever. Okay? All right. So I'm done ranting for the moment. Let's see if there's anybody online, if there are any questions. Again, the best way to interact with me is to ask me a question. I love the fact that you have something to say and you want to dump your opinion on the Q&A, but then I got to scroll through it. And so ask me a question and put a question in there so I can see question, and then I'll be able to interact with you. So that's how I would like it. But seeing as how I can't control anything any more than you can, I will probably have to scroll through a lot of comments. So let's see who is online and what's going on here. So let's go back here. Let's see here. Andy LMT gives me $2.99. Oh, that's the Wrangle family. Hi, guys. Thank you. That's on the, I don't know what the heck they call that, but you can do that if you want. You can drop some money in my pocket. All right. Somebody says circumcised people have more fear. I have no idea if that's true or not, being a circumcised person. I don't know. I've known some uncircumcised people who are pretty fearful. So anyway, let's see here. All right. No question. Jedi Black Knight question. Astro, I guess you mean astrology. Which deities are linked to Venus? My, your 8th house? Which deities are linked? There's a bunch of them. You know, you Jedi Black Knight, have I given you an astrological reading before? Because you ask a lot of astrology questions. Makes me wonder if you should get a session with me, an astrology session or not. Indra is not a Venus. Indra is not a Venus. You say you read about Indra being one of them. Indra is not. Indra is Jupiter. Indra's wife Indrani is Venus. Yeah, you keep asking me about sign aspects for Aruda. So yeah, all those things are important. But it makes me wonder if you should get a session with me, astrology session with me if you haven't already. Astrology.thunderwizard.com. Doku007 question: how much of your time does it take you to complete one of your astrology readings? It takes about an hour. Give or take. It can take a little longer, take a little less, but it takes about an hour. Hi, Lindsay Rogers. Let's see. Dev ET gives 40 something. I don't know what that is, but it looks like some kind of monetary something. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. Question: how you have many Qigong DVDs? Where do I start? I would start with Celestial Qigong. Susie Yoten's wife. Question: do you think Ketu can cause excessive fear? Sure. Ketu represents, at his worst, Ketu represents terrorism. Terrorists who, suicide terrorists. They just walk in and blow themselves. They blow themselves and everybody up. And of course, that's coming from fear. Absolutely. But yeah, Ketu can cause excessive fear. Why do you ask? Are you in excessive fear? Do you feel that Ketu, by the way, is the south node of the moon, for those who don't know who Ketu is. Do you think that Ketu is causing you tremendous fear? The thylacine question: would having OCD be a severe state of fear? Well, now we're talking about things that I may not be qualified to talk about, but I can certainly imagine that fear is part of that. I mean, I have a little OCD myself. Sometimes I have to double check the doors that I lock the doors. So that certainly sounds like fear, but that's kind of out of my, I'm not a psychiatrist, so that's a little out of my expertise. Kartik, I mean, who created us? So I don't know. It sounds like you asked another question previously. Who created us? You created you. You are responsible for your entire existence. Pharaoh Horus, question, what are the chakra opening symptoms? Why are you asking me about chakra opening symptoms? You need to watch my videos about chakras. Guys who come onto my channel, this is I don't know you, but this seems like it. There's a lot of people who are YouTube addicts, who are on YouTube all the time. They jump from one YouTube thing to another. If you want to get the most out of my teachings, you're going to have to put the time and effort to actually watch my videos. I put a lot of videos on my channel. It means you have to go to my channel, you have to search through it, look at the playlists, and put the time and the effort into watching it. But YouTube is set up so that it's constantly trying to, again, it's the same kind of deal. It's trying to keep you, there's another one here. Oh, I click on that one, which takes me to that one. And you don't have the ability to discipline your mind and to focus on one thing at a time. You're just constantly being like a cat, whatever glittery thing or the light in front of you, all that kind of stuff. So, Pharaoh Horus, look at my videos on chakras, and that should answer your question. Makaloka, question, what is the relationship between Jehovah and angels? What makes you think I know anything about Jehovah? What is it about my channel that tells you that I am here to tell you anything about Jehovah? I do not believe in that spiritual system. Jehovah, in my experience, is nothing more than the human ego. That's why he creates so much fear. What are angels? According to the Abrahamic tradition, they're basically slaves. They are these spiritual beings who have no free will and are forced to do the bidding of Jehovah. Does any of that sound like something I want to talk about? No. Romney, Germany, I got involuntary circumcised when I was younger. So did I. I was an infant, but I was involuntarily circumcised. Dude, you got to get over the victim stuff. How many times you've come on how long have you been on my channel, and how many times do I keep telling you, you got to drop the victim mentality. You're addicted to being a victim. I'm not judging you, it's just a fact. You want to be happy, you got to drop it. So what, man? Move on. Find something more important to think about. Okay. Miles, question, what are some good ways of dealing with and reversing feelings of self-hate? Well, one of the things is you need to take a look at why you hate yourself. There's probably some very, very deep things. As you were growing up, you probably were told a lot of things, either energetically or outright verbally, by those that surrounded you. So one of the ways is to you got to work with somebody. That's one of the things I do. Career.thunderwizard.com is I help people uncover those things. So that takes me some time. It's not. I can't just give you a pill and make you fix it. But another one is to adopt the assumption. Assumptions create everything. The assumption that I don't know. The assumption that you are a victim. If you start with that assumption, then every thought after that will be colored by that. Every conclusion will be colored by that. So self-hate is going to be connected to that same fear-based mentality. So one of the most powerful things you can do to overcome self-hate is to adopt the assumption that the universe loves you and wants to give you what will bring you the greatest happiness and satisfaction. Most people at an unconscious level believe the universe is trying to deny them what will make them happy. And they feel guilty and shame about wanting to go after what makes them happy. So that's the one practical thing I can tell you in a sentence that will help you. Wasn't K2 Earth? No. Question, what kind of side effects does weed have on your brain? Well, I'm not a physician, so I can't go through the list of that, but I can tell you that it does definitely hamper your ability to think with your frontal cortex. Absolutely. But yeah, you're asking me a question that I don't feel qualified to answer. I can tell you what it does energetically. You have an energy field. You can call it an aura, call it your energy body, whatever you want. It is your first and last defense against everything, including microbes and people's energy and negative thoughts and all of that. We do yoga, we do internal martial arts, we do breathing, we exercise. One of the benefits of exercise is that all of that breathing is pranayama, which puts energy into your energy field, which is a shield. It protects you. When you smoke marijuana, what happens is you have a little gate down here at the base of the spine. It's called the Ming Men. And it is constantly regulating. It's opening and closing all the time to let energy into your brain and into your body. It regulates the strength of your aura. When you ingest THC, you know, because marijuana has all kinds of other things in it, which some of them are pretty healthy. When you ingest THC, one of the things that happens is the Ming Men goes like this. It just opens up, you know, to maximum capacity. And what happens is it's like if your energy body is like a balloon, it sucks all the energy and goes straight up your spinal column into your head. That's why your head feels like it's blown up like a balloon. That's why you feel like you're floating. That's why you feel like you're having this spiritual experience. But what's really happened is that all of that energy that's there to protect you, which is also how you interact with others, by the way. One of the ways that you are able to interact with other human beings and their energy field and their thought process is through your energy body. When that's gone, you can't connect to them anymore. So you don't know what somebody's feeling. Have you ever try this, by the way. If you hang around with people who smoke weed, try this. You decide one of those times not to smoke while they do. Let them, you know, puff or eat or whatever they do to get high. And then try and communicate with them. You will see a huge difference. You will see that they're not hearing you. They're not communicating very well. And they want to get into these deep philosophical conversations, man. But, you know, when you try and do that when you're not loaded and they are, you can tell that they're just not, their thought process just isn't connecting. And they're not connecting to you. It's because their energy field has been completely sucked up into their brain and they can't feel you energetically or emotionally. So those are some of the shamanic things that marijuana can do to you. Let's see. I talked about K2 being Earth. No, I don't think I said that. I don't think I said K2 was Earth. Okay. Question. Fear could be rational too. Okay, so that's not a question. So you've got my attention. I'm going to read what you say, but you're not asking a question. You want to argue your state. You're going to argue in defense of being afraid. I haven't even read it, but that's what it sounds like. And let me see what it happens to see here. Fear could be rational too because we observe bad events happen to others because others are harmed, and fear is a fight or flight response if we can't defend ourselves. Again, there's no question in there. So what I hear in that is that you are addicted to your fear. You are afraid of letting go of it because if you let go of your fear, something bad will happen. So you believe that you can control events by being and staying in fear. Okay? I don't agree with you. All that fear does, unless it's happening with an immediate, if there is an immediate threat to your life, then you have my permission to be in fear and to act accordingly. Right now, there is nothing that I have to be afraid of that I'm aware of. I mean, there might be a plane, because I live near the LA airport. There might be a plane flying headed towards my house, but I can't do anything about that anyway, so there's no point in being afraid of that. I have water here. I have food. There's no reason for me to be afraid. So for me to be anxious about anything is irrational. So if what you're saying is you want to be in fear when you don't have any immediate dangers, You are telling me you prefer to live irrationally. I don't want to live like that. You can if you want, but I don't want to do that. Okay, question. Overcoming fear is the consistent theme of your lessons, but when crossing into the unfamiliar, in meditation, spiritual work, I'm overcome with overwhelming primal fear that I cannot suppress. Good. Good. He's like, why is that good? Because that, if what's happening is that when you go into meditation, you are overcome with fear, it means that that fear is always there on an unconscious level. Remember that unconscious means you are not consciously aware of it. Let me give you an example of unconsciousness. You know, a lot of people have a hard time with this concept. It's one of the main underpinnings that I focus on all the time is understanding that we have this thing called the unconscious. There's a thing called unconscious projection. And I'll give you an example of, we've probably all seen this or experienced it. People who are in relationships, in romantic relationships, people who cheat, they are always jealous. They are the ones that are taking their spouse's phone and seeing who texted you, who did that, who were you talking to on the phone? You were sleeping with him, weren't you? Who is that guy? It's because they are out there doing exactly what they are accusing the other person of, and so they project it onto the other person. They project what they're doing onto the other person. Now, on a conscious level, they don't know that's what they're doing. And they, if you talk to them, they are absolutely convinced it is a fact. I know she's cheating on me. I absolutely know it. But they are unconscious that they are just simply projecting their own guilt about their own life onto somebody else. It's happening on an unconscious level. So when you go into meditation, if what comes up is all this fear, it means that fear is already there. So just because you're not consciously aware of it doesn't mean it's not running everything that you do. So it's a good thing that if you go into meditation, you are overcome by fear, then you can tell yourself exactly what we've been talking about, which is, I'm feeling all this fear. Is there a fear? Is there a threat of me falling off a cliff right now? No. Is there a fear of some object flying through the air to cause me physical pain? Nope. Is there a loud noise that's making me aware that I should be afraid? Nope. Why did I list those? Because if you go back and watch this from the beginning, you will know that what I say in the beginning is that there are only 3 fears that are inbred into the human being. Nature has only given us 3 fears. The first one is the fear of heights. The second one is the fear of loud noises, and the third one is the fear of fast-moving objects. All those things indicate immediate death is coming. Be afraid and jump out of the way. Every other fear that doesn't fall into those categories is learned. You learned it somehow, which means it's irrational. So in meditation, if you're overwhelmed with fear, that is a good thing because that means that your unconscious is revealing to you what it's carrying around all the time. The first step to dealing with that is just let yourself have the fear and don't do anything about it. We are creatures that we are programmed to stifle uncomfortable feelings. This is probably the biggest thing that I deal with clients. The feelings are uncomfortable and they can't stand the feelings, and so they do something. They either do something to stuff the feelings or they react to them by, having temper tantrums or doing something crazy or, acting out in ways that are addictive or self-destructive. I'm a human being. I'm talking about myself too. I could go through all the list of the things that I've done, especially during the past year, right? Because I had a partner who was dying and had died and all the stuff I went through to deal with all my emotions. But that's the biggest thing, is learning how to have all of those feelings and think rationally. You cannot think rationally if you are afraid. And if you identify that you don't have those three things to be afraid of, then you have the ability to choose to think rationally. And that's why I teach people that the first basic assumption that you should adopt and continuously invest in thinking about and meditating on is that the universe is here to give you everything that you need and want. And that you will always be taken care of. And as long as you follow your deepest soul desire, the universe has to make sure that all of your physical needs are met and that you are happy. It has to. That is the rule. If you adopt that and invest in that, that will then, every thought and belief subsequent to that will be in line with that assumption, which will give you happiness. Somebody on one of my videos about the Matrix wanted to get into an argument with me about something and said that to seek your joy without being fear is idiotic because, and then he goes through all this intellectualization about why you need to be in fear all the time. And then he says, people who do that are idiots. And my response was, and yet I am healthy, happy, and prosperous. And if that makes me an idiot, then sign me up. Call me an idiot. I'm a happy idiot. I'd much rather be a happy idiot than a fearful genius. Of course, I don't think they're genius. I think they're actually idiots. They're the idiots, in my opinion. Anyway, let's continue with any questions. Yeah, so I'm glad that you can't suppress your fear. I don't want you to suppress it. The fact that you're trying to suppress it is the problem. So the more that you meditate, the more that you can be in that fear, that overwhelming fear, and have the experience that nothing bad is happening to you, the easier it'll get for you to be rational about everything you do in life. And the more that you're able to do that in meditation, more and more you will see the ways that you have been sabotaging yourself out of this fear, out of reacting to this fear on an unconscious level. You'll see how you've been doing it and you haven't been aware of it. So I think that's great. It's an excellent sign. It's a sign that you're making huge progress. Continue. Congratulations. You are to be congratulated that that is your experience. Okay. Question. Is Celestial Qigong level 1 sufficient to send the bat signal to ancestors and masters? Yes. Susie Jotun's wife. Question. What does under Veda mean? As example, Venus under Veda from Ketu. I don't know. I have no idea. I've never heard that. So maybe there's something in some kind. Maybe, listen, I don't know everything there is to know about Vedic astrology. Not even close. I know what I know, and I'm really good at the stuff that I do know, but there's a lot of stuff I don't know. So I have no idea what that means. Stompy the Archon Dragon. Better be careful. We've got an Archon talking to us, so be prepared. He might want to steal the life out of our souls. Question. I've been into conspiracies and things. Really? Archon the Dragon, and you've been into conspiracies? I'm shocked. Giving you a hard time. Question. I've been into conspiracies and things like that for a while. What steps would you recommend trying to step out of the fear mindset? Did you say Qigong? No. What happened? Did you say Qigong earlier? Yes, I did. Qigong is a very powerful way to step out of fear. Why is that? Because Qigong, by the way, since we're going back to the energy and fear, remember I was talking about what happens when you smoke marijuana is that it takes away all of your energy out of your energy body and shoves it up into your head. What's one of the first things that happens most of the time with people who smoke weed? They get paranoid. Why do you think they get paranoid? Because all of their energy is gone and they sense it. It makes them feel vulnerable. They try to overcome that with their intellect. That's why pot smokers are so intellectual. They try to think their way out of everything because they don't have the energy to protect themselves anymore. So that is an instinctual fear that's coming from a lack of that energy, that protection of the energy. Qigong gets you out of the fear, because when you do Qigong, one of the first things that happens is that you feel the energy flow through you, and it's a very pleasant experience, at least initially. And you feel this power, and you'll see you'll be able to step back. What you'll do is you'll get the benefits of what you're trying to get out of weed. That's what weed, when people smoke weed, what they're trying to get is the benefit that you actually do get from Qigong, because they're giving themselves a false experience of enhanced energy, which is really the opposite. And they're, it's squeezing out sometimes if you get the right weed and, whatever, you get the good feeling, which means that your brain is squeezing out the DMT and the dopamine and everything else, which makes you feel good. When you do Qigong, you actually get that. You get the additional energy, which feels good, which makes you feel safe. When you feel safe, you're not in fear. You can think more rationally, which allows you to meditate. That's why Qigong and meditation go so well together. And it also does stimulate the brain to release DMT and dopamine in self-regenerative ways, meaning when you smoke weed and that happens, or you do other drugs and that happens, then it squeezes it out like a sponge, but then you end up with a deficit. That's why you crash when you come down. That's part of what makes you dependent on the chemical. Qigong is the other way around. Qigong actually stimulates, it's like a muscle, the brain's ability to create DMT becomes larger, because it's like, weightlifting for the brain. And then you secrete more of it, but instead of coming down and crashing, you don't ever get that. It's just your levels increase and you have this feeling of well-being. Now, later on, you might go through some fear, but that's because you're becoming conscious. You're becoming conscious of all of the fear that you've been suppressing, and so you do have to go through that kind of cleansing. As time goes on, you have to stay disciplined to stay in the practice. A lot of people leave the practice because they can't handle the fears that are coming up, and so they stop doing it. But if you have the discipline to stay through the feelings of the fears and work through them, then you will actually become conscious. You will be more conscious in your life. You'll be able to make decisions and take actions that will be coming from your higher cortex. Indra, the god Indra, a lot of people don't know this. Indra is a god of the mind. And if you read the mythology about Indra and him destroying Vritra, he cuts off the head of Vritra. Vritra is the reptilian brain. It looks like a cobra. If you were to take my head off and you were just take everything but the reptilian brainstem, you would see coming out of my neck, my spinal column, and then you would see what looks like a cobra. That's the reptilian brain. And then on top of that, you have the emotional mammalian brain. The cortex that goes over it and covers it is Indra. You didn't know that, did you? That's who Indra is. That's why Indra cuts off the head of Vritra. He covers over him. I think he smothers him in the waters or something like that. That's talking about the brain, the neocortex, as we were evolving. The Indra, which is the lord of the mind, Inthura, Ra, king, Thu, mind, in, full. Lord of the full mind, Lord of the full moon. That's why they worshipped him. That's why he was the main god of the Vedas. That's why Thunar is the first cause of Thu, the mind. So those people, like the Asatru guy, the American Asatru guy, I listened to him talk about Thor, and he talked about Thor like he was some mindless brute who had no self-control and he was quick to anger. Idiot, knows nothing about what he's talking about. Thunar is a god of the mind. That is why if you are a racist, you are asking for Thunar to come and change your thinking, because you are definitely not in your cerebral cortex. You are in your reptilian brain. And you are asking for him to come and bring you justice. Why do you think the Nazis were destroyed? Because they wore Indra's symbol, which is the swastika, the thunder. They were asking for thunder to come and strike them down, which is what happened. That's why they lost the war. They had the ability, they had the manpower, they had the technology, they had the army, but Hitler kept making stupid mistakes. And if he had not made those stupid mistakes, he would have won the Second World War. Indra protected the world. Indra is the protector of human beings, the protector of all humans. Thunar is the protector of all human beings. That is why you cannot live in your upper cortex and not see everybody as yourself. If you can't see everybody as yourself, you're living in your fear-based brain. So if you want to be spiritual, this is what's going to happen. This is why, coming back to energy work, when you do Qigong, when you do energy work, you are tapping into the power of magnetic energy, the force of magnetism, which is Indra and Thunar, and you will, if you continue doing it, you will begin to see yourself in everybody. And you will see yourself as a member of the human race as opposed to your country or your religion or your race or whatever else. Boy, I'm really on my soapbox today, aren't I? Okay. Question. Vivid imagination could mix up our understanding of what's really happening in our head or what's really happening. Okay, so you're not asking a question, again, which is a form of control. You're pretending to ask a question because you'll know I'll look at it, but you're not asking a question, you're making a statement, and I don't accept your assumption. You are introducing an assumption as though it's a fact. Vivid imagination could mix up our understanding of what's really happening in our head or what's really happening. I don't accept that. I don't know why you're afraid of your imagination. Your imagination is one thing over here. What you're afraid of is your narcissism. You're afraid of your emotional attachments, and that you should be afraid of. Your emotional agendas will definitely color your assumptions. If you are emotionally attached to a certain way of thinking or being, that is going to limit your ability to see things objectively. Your imagination is something else. So I don't know why you're afraid of your imagination. Your imagination is important because it's your imagination that allows you to connect to other potential timelines and realities. And whenever you change, and you change spiritually or evolve, what happens is you are jumping from one timeline to another. In order to do that, you need your imagination. So I do not accept your premise, your assumption. I disagree with that. Now, to continue with your question. When I lucid dream, bad images come up in my mind and that creates fear. That's not a question. You put question marks on the end of it, but you're not asking me a question. I'm sorry that that's happening to you. All that means is that you are dealing with your suppressed fears, in your unconscious. You're just human. So the thing to do is to work on actual meditation. Lucid dreaming is great, but it's not meditation. You should work on actual meditation. You should probably have a teacher who you can talk to who will mirror back to you what's really going on in your unconscious and give you things to do. That's what I do. It's one of the things I do. And to be aware that in your unconscious mind you have a lot of fears. That's okay too. Okay? But again, you haven't asked me a question. Question, do you think the trickster gods are messing with Washington, D.C.? I'm not sure I understand your question. No, I think that what's messing with Washington, D.C. is human beings who are in fear. They're politicians. Politicians are, it's just better off for everybody if I don't get started on that. No, I don't think the trickster gods are messing with anybody. I just think that that human beings are being human beings. Mark Graham, question. Can you speak to the notion of fear with Jesus before the crucifixion and Odin before sacrificing himself to himself? Did Odin have overcome fear before hanging himself on Yggdrasil? Well, I can't speak directly for Odin. Let me see if I get anything. The response I get is no, that he wasn't afraid. I can't imagine myself in that position without being afraid, but we have to look at Odin's name. So Odin's name is traditionally Woden. The suffix "n" means consisting of. That's why if you have a wooden door, a door is made of wood. If you have a golden coin, it's a coin made of gold. It consists of. Woden. He is somebody who consists of wod. Wod is wonder. It is shamanic ecstasy. It's translated as rage, but it doesn't mean rage like anger. It means so inspired to the point that it's ecstatic and intense and wow. I mean, we have the word wow. I believe it comes from the same thing. Wod, wow, wow. I think that's what Woden is. So he is filled with wow. He is filled with wonder. So when he sacrificed himself to himself, that is a way of saying that he, through his wonder, destroyed his limitation of his ego so that he could connect to everything, which is why he then what was revealed to him was the runes, which are what? The aksharas, the sacred syllables that create the entire universe. And if you understand the science of the sacred symbols of the universe, then you can have the power to do what? Galdr, which is chant, magically speak into existence, which is one of the things that mantra does. So based on that, just if I look at his name, I don't think that he was afraid. Jesus, very clear, assuming that Jesus existed, I don't believe he did. But assuming that Jesus existed and assuming that the Gospels about him are true, he made it very clear that he was afraid. He was so afraid that he went into the Garden of Gethsemane and bled. He sweated blood, which is an actual thing that happens when somebody's under extreme duress. Like just incredible, they sweat blood. The capillaries in their, whatever, their scalp burst and blood comes out. It's a sign of tremendous anxiety, just abject horror and fear. And he asked to have this cup taken from him, and apparently God the Father refused. Now, just from that perspective, why would you want that person to sacrifice for you? He didn't want to do it. He was forced to do it. It's not a sacrifice, by the way. If you're forced to do it, it's not a sacrifice. A sacrifice is something that you willingly give. So, anyway, I could just go on and on about all the problems with all of that. Why would you want to worship that? Anyway, the notion of fear with Jesus before the crucifixion, yeah, I mean, and again, the whole crucifixion was about, again, let's be clear about what that was supposedly about. That, that Jesus comes along, first you've got God creates these human beings, and these asshole fuck up human beings, they decide to do their own thing. They eat the apple because why? Because they want to have knowledge of themselves. What the hell is wrong with them that they want to know themselves? And then they're taken out of their prison called the Garden of Eden, and they're kicked out of that. And then God decides to curse every single one of their offspring, these innocent offspring who haven't done anything, but just because they're yours, I'm going to curse them. And he curses the entire human race with destruction and hell, gives them this religion that they have to follow to the letter, and if they don't follow it to the letter, then Jehovah is furious with them. And so he has determined that he is going to flood the whole earth and get rid of his creation, and he can't even do that right. And they still come back, and they still sin. They still miss the mark. And so they're going to hell and going to eternal destruction. Hell is actually the underworld, not a place of destruction. And so along comes Jesus, who says, listen, like I said, this guy Jehovah, he's got a temper, and he's just really kind of a perfectionist, and he really hates your guts. He wants to kill you. I like you, I don't have anything against you. I tell you what, I'll do it in your place, but I'm kind of afraid to do it, but I'll go ahead and do it anyway because he has to kill somebody. So I'll take on everybody's problems, and then you guys don't have to be responsible for your life. I'll just do it for you. Why would anybody want to worship that? Makes no sense. I mean, I understand it. I was there, but once you get to see it for what it really is, well, what a stupid religion. Worst religion that ever came out. Or the whole Abrahamic thing. Anyway. All right. What does the Ayeshyalmer exactly represent? This is the Ayeshyalmer. You know, to ask that question, what does it exactly represent, you're going to have to get into the realm of people's opinions. This is an Ayeshyalmer, and if anybody is steeped in Vedic or Hindu talismanic magic, you will have seen this before. It's called an Ashtanga Yantra, and it does the same function because it's the same tradition. This symbol has got to be tens of thousands of years old. And if you go back, there's one of my videos is called Ancient Connections, I think, and I talk about this. But, you know, it's also found in multiple other religions. You know, I've had people come on here and say, oh, look at him, he's got that African symbol of the, you know, and it looks exactly the same. It's the same kind of thing. It's a protective symbol. I believe that it's talking about connecting into the 8 realms. We live in a 9-world world tree, which means that there are 9 dimensions. We live in one of them in the center, which is called Midgard or Middle Yard. We live in, or Middle Earth. We live in the middle one. As you can see, the middle one is intersected by all of the other dimensions. In all of these other dimensions live different beings. The giants, the celestial gods, the terrestrial gods, the underworld, the dwarves, the agents of transformation in the fire home, the water home. They're all different beings and entities that live in all of these, and they are all coming together here in the center where we live. So one of the things that I think this does is this provides protection, because here you have what's known as the Elhaj rune, which is this symbol here, in all 8 of the external worlds. So that has to do with spiritual protection. So by wearing this, you are balancing and protecting yourselves from imbalance from the other world. That's where imbalance comes from. It comes from there's too much energy coming from one of the worlds, and that disrupts the equilibrium here in Midgard. Shamanism is not about reaching a state of enlightenment where nothing changes. Shamanism is about a dynamic balance where you're continuously balancing because things go up and down. And we're continuously in this dynamic balance of all of the 9 worlds. It represents the 9 levels of the mind. I could go into all the different levels of the mind and the human being. So to me, this is a holographic symbol of everything. It's the same as the Chinese Bagua, the 8 gates. But traditionally we know that this was that when warriors went into battle, they would put that symbol on their 3rd eye, and they called it the Helm of Terror, which meant that they felt if they did that, it would open up the 3rd eye, and when they would go into battle, it would strike terror into their opponents, which is, you know, kind of a lower level symbolic understanding that when we are balanced on all 9 levels, it destroys negativity. So it's a protective symbol, protects you from negativity, which is nothing more than imbalance, ignorance, and the like. How's that for an answer to your question? Let's see. Question. Stompy the Archon Dragon, would the Huul breath work for fear? Yes. Huul breath, H-U-U-L. Go onto my channel, or just go onto YouTube and type in H-U-U-L breath meditation. I recommend that for everybody. It is probably the most fundamental, all-encompassing thing that I teach, which is why I teach it for free on the YouTube channel. Dev et. So Dev Et, first, you ask a lot of questions. You might want to spend more time on my channel watching my videos. Is a shaman and a psychic the same? No. Short answer, no. Ryan Coyne, okay, there's a question at the end. You didn't tell me it's a question, but I can see a question mark. Wait, then he says he's not trying to start an argument. So he probably is trying to start an argument. The way you said it sounded like Jesus voluntarily sacrificed himself rather than being forced like you said earlier. Was he forced or not? Yeah, you are kind of picking, splitting hairs with me. Meditate on it. Jesus didn't exist, so who cares? Who cares? It's whether, it depends on what they're trying to shove down your throat at any given moment. He didn't exist, so none of that happened. Susie Jotun's wife, do you do your consultations, counseling via Skype or only on the phone? Why do you ask? It depends. I don't know why you're asking that question. Do you have a problem with your phone? A lot of people want to Skype me because they want to have a personal connection with me, and sometimes I don't want to Skype because I don't want to wear the costume and I want to just talk on the phone. So it will depend on where you live. I will do Skype for anybody who's out of the country because I don't, you can't do it by phone. But if you're in the country, I prefer phone because then I can, if I'm looking at your astrology chart, I can flip between my iPad or my computer or, that kind of thing. So I prefer phone. All right, no more questions. Let's take a break, and then I will come back with some ways in which you can overcome fear. Okay, so let's recap. What is fear? Fear is a very necessary defense mechanism in the human being, and it is there for very good reason, because there are things that we do need to be afraid of in this three-dimensional reality, but those things are very limited. If you're living in a state of fear, you may have been traumatized. If somebody grew up in a war zone, for example, they are going to have to deal with a lot of fear and, being afraid all the time. If you lived in a scenario where there was a very real threat, that there was, some military or governmental, or maybe you lived in an abusive home where you had somebody who would physically or mentally abuse you. I had some of those things when I grew up. So what ends up happening is you learn to be in fear all the time because you never know when that's going to happen to you. Nevertheless, those are learned. You cannot be in your rational mind when you are in a state of fear, because your rational mind is there when you don't have anything to be afraid of. Then you can look at things objectively, you can think through things, you can think about concepts, you can think critically. You cannot do that when you're in fear, because in fear you have to take immediate action to save your life. There are only 3 fears that we're born with. Only 3 things that nature decided we needed to be afraid of: heights, sudden movement, and loud noises. Everything else is learned. So even if you did grow up in a traumatic experience for an extended period of time, you owe it to yourself, once you're out of that, and most people are, most people, even if they grew up in a traumatic scenario, once they get to the age where they can take care of themselves, they are no longer in immediate danger. But they still live with the trauma, and so they live in that fear all the time, which means that they never get to their higher awareness. This is why people, when they take drugs, when they're addicted to alcohol, they never emotionally mature. This is why another reason why I really, hammer on people not to do alcohol or drugs or power plants, because when you do power plants, even if that power plant gives you this amazing spiritual experience, I know that does happen. Ideally, if you were to take it, you take it once in your life, it cracks your aura open, you have an experience, you're protected by the shaman who's running the ritual, and then you can meet the deity or whoever that gives you your life purpose, and then you never do it again. Because whenever you do that, you cannot emotionally evolve. So there are people who are middle-aged who have the emotional capacity of children because they live in fear. And they've lived in fear their whole lives. And this is why conspiracy thinking, if you are a conspiracy nut, you are living in fear. You cannot emotionally evolve when you live in fear. As I've said before, there are conspiracies out there. They're not the ones that you think. They are not the ones that you think, but there are conspiracies out there. But I don't spend any time thinking about them because it's a waste of time. There will always be conspiracies. If you have the assumption that you are a weak, vulnerable being that is not being watched over and cared for by the universe, then you need to be afraid all the time, which is why you are. If you're a conspiracy nut, and there's more than just conspiracy, there's apocalyptic thinking, which is there's going to be a supernova, or there's going to be a solar maximum or a solar minimum, or there's going to be an ice age, or there's, there is a very real threat to global warming. It's actually really happening. But again, I don't waste time worrying about it because there's only so much I can do in this world. So the other thing is you don't worry about things that you don't have any control over. I don't have any control over it. So, I'm actually doing what I can. What I can to combat global warming is helping people think rationally, because when they do, they will understand the reasoning behind why the overwhelming majority of scientists, in fact, not just majority, just science in general, has said, yes, there is a thing called global warming, and we are living it. Then you have the ability to look at it without being afraid or feeling guilty, which is, I think, the majority of why people reject global warming, is because they feel guilty. They drive their cars and they do all the things that, they know if they were to admit to themselves these things cause global warming, they would feel guilty. I'll give you an example of a friend of mine. And this was way back 20 years ago when global warming, the idea was just coming to the awareness of population. We were just starting to see how it was coming about in the climate. And this guy did not believe in global warming. And that, it didn't bother me that. It bothered me that he didn't think about it. And so I asked him, so tell me your reasoning behind it. And his response was, well, we don't have enough there isn't enough evidence to prove it. And of course, I could take exception with that, but I didn't. And I said, I don't believe you. I don't believe that that's your reasoning. Now, to his credit, he was able to get honest with me. And I said, tell me what your real reason for not wanting global warming to be real. And he said, well, because I drive this Camaro. It's a 70s Camaro. And I'm afraid that if the government, that's what he was afraid of. He was afraid that the government was going to somehow declare global warming was real, and therefore we were not going to use fossil fuels anymore. This was his fear. He said, I'm afraid if the government comes out and says that global warming is real, that then we will be banned from using fossil fuels, which means I won't be able to drive my Camaro. I said, seriously? That's your whole basis for not wanting to believe in global warming? He said, yeah, I like my Camaro and I don't want to give it up. I couldn't be angry with him because he was being so honest with me. But whenever you have these kind of irrational fears, once you peel away underneath it, you're going to get to some really irrational, childish thought process. This is what living in fear will do for you. It will keep you emotionally a child. There are people who are so intellectually so smart. Now, I'm pretty good. I'm really good because what I can do is I can find out what your emotional agenda is, and so I can usually throw a monkey wrench into somebody's intellectual argument. I'm really quite good at that. But for most of the time, these people are so intellectually smart and so emotionally immature that you can't have a discussion with them. You just can't. It's impossible to have a real discussion about anything that you're afraid of without being honest about what your emotional agendas are, and without being aware of what your emotional agendas are. And none of those things can happen if you're living in fear. Because when you're in fear, you have to hold on to the fear, because the fear of, there's a wolf behind that bush and that wolf is going to come out and tear me to pieces. If you let go of that, then there is a real possibility that you turn your back, the wolf is going to come and attack you. So when it comes to conspiracy theories, when it comes to apocalyptic thinking, if you are holding on to that, it's because there's a rationality, there's a rationale that if I give up this fear, then I'm going to get destroyed. The threat will get me. So I'm going to stay in my conspiracy theory. I'm going to stay in my fear. Okay? Does that make sense? So again, let's look at the ways that you can overcome fear-based thinking. That's just a short list, by the way. There's probably a lot more ways that we can do it. So let's see if there are any more questions. I'm wondering if we may have run out of questions here. Question: are all conspiracy theories false because they counter mainstream news? You're trying to set me up. And you know you're trying to set me up. I never said all conspiracy theories are false. In fact, I said that there are conspiracies. They're just not the ones that most people buy into. So you have helped me, because this is something I wanted to say. Fear makes you vulnerable to manipulation and makes you vulnerable to deception. And again, to understand this, we see this every time you buy a product. The way that you sell a product is, first you create a need. Because most people, a lot of things that you have, like especially, like I've got a whole, like this whole side of my kitchen, there's this whole just filled with supplements. You know, like ginseng and vitamin D and vitamin C and all kinds of things like that. So I don't take actual multivitamins or anything like that, but I do take a lot of herbs and that kind of stuff. But it is kind of funny to me because there's always some new magical new herbal formula out there that you need for such and such. So you have to create the need. So one would be, let's see, I'm 54 years old. Luckily, at least so far as I can tell, I don't have this problem. I seem to have plenty of testosterone in me. So I'm doing okay for now, but that's the big one. They tell you, once you hit 30, your testosterone levels drop, and you got to blah, 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 and they'll sell you these fucking herbs that do nothing for your testosterone level, by the way. They don't. I haven't noticed the difference. I've tried them, and I haven't noticed any difference whatsoever. But you start off with the need, you create the need, that once you hit 30, your testosterone levels drop, and by the time you reach middle age, your testosterone levels are minus 200% of what you're supposed to have, and you can't go back and do. You need this, Product X. Product X is this brand new thing that's been done, that's been pulled from the brain cavities of monkeys in Persia that only have the ringtail in the blue section of the northwestern. They come up with, you can only get it through us. You need this. Get this from us. Buy Product X. This is what fear is. So conspiracy theories are doing that same thing. So the mainstream news. Mainstream news. Let's just listen. Let's just address the assumption that has been fed to you with that word. First off, once you start calling something by a name, it now has become it's become an extreme. It's black and white. There's the mainstream news, and then there's the alternative news. So first you create an assumption, which is all mainstream news is false. And so therefore you have to get the alternative news. So we have to go onto Facebook, or we have to watch Alex Jones, or we have to watch Fox News. We have to watch the alternative. Here's another word that's thrown around. Political correctness. Well, we don't want to be politically correct because that's bad, right? Politically correct, because that means you're knuckling under to popular opinion. You're politically correct. But politically correct can mean anything. If I walk into a Republican donor convention, the political correctness of that convention is going to be to believe in guns and global warming is false and lower taxes and whatever it is that they're touting. That's the politically correct thing for them. If I go into a feminist, radical feminist meeting, there's going to be a politically correct thing there. So throwing something out doesn't somehow make you immune. It doesn't mean that you somehow have some understanding that those mainstream people don't have. You are being manipulated as much as anybody, especially if you have to hide behind these phrases. The mainstream media, the alternative media. You have to think for yourself. Critical thinking says, when is something true and when is something false? Sometimes it's not that simple. So then we ask, when is something sometimes true and sometimes false? It snows in the winter. That's true sometimes. Sometimes it's not true. It doesn't snow here in the winter. When is something partially true and partially false? This is critical thinking, and you cannot have critical thinking if you have to throw out these words. I get called a liberal all the time. What the fuck does that mean? The fuck does that mean? You just thrown me into some little corner. I think I'm one of those people that you can't really stick me into a corner very easily. Think for yourself, man. So I don't even know if I'm going to answer that question, because you're asking me to say, are all conspiracy theories false? I never said that all conspiracy theories were false. And I never said anything about countering mainstream news. However, I will say something about this. If you do not know the difference between journalism and opinion-driven news, then you are being manipulated. And there is a large number of people who are being manipulated because the, let's just say, non-verifiable opinion-driven news is always throwing out fear. You have to be careful from them. They're trying to destroy this. They're trying to destroy that. The mainstream media and all that's happening is that they have pushed you into that fear zone. And now you are ready to receive product X. And it won't matter if what they say makes sense or even if it's true. Because now you have a biological reaction. You are addicted to the reaction that comes when you are afraid. Because being in fear is addicting. All of that adrenaline and all of the other things that go that hype you up. That's why people watch horror movies. That's why people watch boxing. I'm guilty of that. That's why people watch all that, because it gets the adrenaline pumping. It's addictive. So the fear-based news is addictive. And I promise you, it doesn't matter if they're telling you the truth or not. You just want to be put into that state of fear where you can look at everything at black and white, and then you know who the enemy is. And once you know who the enemy is, then you're stuck in fear. You're constantly fighting the enemy. So just by asking me that question, I already know that at least part of the time you are living and addicted to that fear-based reality. And that's why you like all that crap. That's why you like the Alex Jones and the Drudge Report and all of those guys that have absolutely zero verification. They can say anything that they want, and it doesn't matter if it's true or not. And let me just remind everybody here. Do you know where the term fake news came from? Just ask yourself, where did the term fake news come from? Here's the answer. The term fake news was first coined when it became discovered that Facebook was being overrun by false news stories having to do with the election. That was the first time the word fake news was ever used. It was about Russian bots and Russians who were with false Twitter and Facebook accounts were planting false news stories, like the what was that? The Pizzagate. That was a false news story. Fake news. All that had to happen was somebody, you know who, decided to start using that term, because through projection we project onto others what's really happening with us, and now people are so stupid that because somebody says that that's fake news, it must be fake. I mean, that's powerful. If you say over and over and over again that something is fake, if you need to be part of the crowd, if you need to be safe out of your fear of not being vulnerable, you will stick with the crowd that's saying that, because maybe that is fake. Maybe that is fake. And again, do you know the difference between actual journalism, where journalists have to provide proof for their sources, and the difference between, say, Sean Hannity, who can say whatever the hell he wants, or Alex Jones, who can say whatever the hell he wants and has no responsibility to back it up. And when you start telling them, journalists, this and that, they will say, I'm not a journalist. They do that for their own legal protection. Just as an example. So I kind of went off on that, but let's keep going. Mark Stratton. Wait, Swift Data says, wait, am I on? All right, I think I'm on to everything. Romney on Germany. Yeah, banning fossil fuels worked really great. Not. Who said that fossil fuels were banned? Dude, come on. You are exemplifying my point. Nobody has ever banned fossil fuels, so of course it hasn't worked. It would be very hard to do. I agree with you. And by the way, even if we did, well, I won't get into it. Swift Data asks how to get past carnal desires. Why do you need to get past carnal desires? There's an assumption there that getting past carnal desires is a good thing. Who said that? I never said that. Please enjoy your carnal desires. If you have problems like you're addicted to certain things, that's something else. But why do you need to get past your carnal desires? I don't know what a carnal fear is. Carnal means of the flesh, which usually has to do with sexuality. Are you afraid of your sexuality? I don't know what you're asking. Mark Stratton, question. I keep wording this question poorly, but is there a certain amount of wisdom in caution? But where does caution cross the line into fear? I mean, you're not wording the question poorly. It's clear to me from your question that you are in fear. Because somebody who isn't in fear doesn't ask that question. They know the difference. You don't, or you wouldn't be asking. You err on the side of caution all the time as a habit, because that makes you feel safe. But if you were actually safe, then you know the difference between, you know what, that looks a little, I think I'm going to have a little caution about that. Let's see what that's about. But you don't walk around being cautious about everything. Is there a certain amount of wisdom in caution? Well, of course there is. And where does caution cross into the line of fear? When you exhibit any of these symptoms. That's a good place to start. If you live in those symptoms, there's a good chance you're living in fear and not healthy caution. The apologetic question. I asked Odin about a fear of lack of resources now that I'm following my life path. Perthro came up, so when you asked Odin, you mean when you did a rune reading? I asked Odin about a fear of lack of resources now that I'm following my life path. Perthro came up, flipped in realm of actions. Any notes on this or fear of resources? Daniel Lees. Okay, so Daniel. Perthro came up reversed, Merc stave in the, to answer, in case somebody doesn't know, what you do is you do a 9-world rune reading, which is one of the things that I offer, runereadings.thunderwizard.com, and it'll show you all kinds of things, and one of them is the actions that you're taking. So it's the 9 worlds here. Except that you have runes in each one of the, the 9 worlds. So he means in the south. The southernmost, if you have 3 rows of 3, the middle one on the bottom will be the south, which is the realm of actions. So that tells you what actions you need to take. So he's saying that Perthro, which is the rune of karma, for lack of a better word, destiny, was flipped. So, you asked, let me make sure I understand the context of your question here, because you asked Odin about a fear. So you have a fear of a lack of resources in terms of you following your path. Okay, so I have to have the context right, otherwise I won't interpret it correctly. So you asked that question. I have this fear about resources following my path. What can you tell me about that, Odin? And then you do the 9 worlds. And in action, it says that Perthro is reversed. In that context, my interpretation is that Odin is saying, man, you're done with that. Stop acting out of fear. That's old. That's old news. You've already worked through that. That, you know, when Perthro is reversed, it's like it means that the universe has said that karmically is done. There is nothing left for you there. So if it were a relationship, like if you were asking, should I be with my girlfriend or something, and it came up reversed, then that would be the universe saying, you guys have paid off your karmic debt to each other. No matter how hard you try, that relationship will never work again. There's nothing left. All relationships, by the way, are karmically based. So that means that you have no more karma left when it comes to acting out of fear in terms of your life path. So Odin is saying, you know, stop with the fear. It's not serving you. Just go for it. Don't worry about it. You will be taken care of on the physical realm. You know, in terms of actions, don't take any actions based on fear. That's how I interpret that. So hopefully that'll be helpful to you. Mark Graham comments, so acting from Orlog negates fear because all three bodies are in alignment with the objective. Well, I think ideally, but acting from Orlog, your origin law, which is your own internal soul desire, which is oftentimes in direct opposition to what your fear is telling you to do. Stay with the job, stay with the relationship, you know, don't go after what you really want, you know, blah, blah, blah. But your Orlog, your internal soul desire, may tell you to take a risk and do something different from that. Eventually, you will see through experience that there's no need for the fear. But initially, it's true that people may go through a lot of fear when they take that step. So I don't want to take that out of it. It is possible, and just because somebody has fear does not mean they shouldn't take contrary action to that fear, right? But in general, I agree with you. I agree with what you're saying. Ryan Korn, how do you do that live action PowerPoint style stuff? I have a program here which is allowing me to broadcast this live to YouTube, which is called Wirecast. And you can put little things in here and you can click on little pictures. And that's how it's done. Okay, that'll be $50,000. Okay, so that's all for now. Let me take another break. We're coming to the normal end of our 2-hour broadcast, and then I'll see if I have anything left to say. Okay, so I'm trying to think of something here as I end things. What keeps coming to me, and I'm resisting it, because what I don't want to do is I don't want to sound like I'm judging people. You know, I feel pretty passionately about this. And I'll tell you, maybe I should just share that, why I feel so passionately about this. It saddens me to see so many people in our world, especially people in power, operating from fear and creating fear. It bothers me that so much of the population is so easily manipulated into fear-based thinking and will believe whatever is shoved down their throat, including conspiracy theories. That people are so easily manipulated by fear and their need to feel fear. There are people who can't function without it. There's a lot of people who can't function without it. If you take away the threat, they won't know how to exist. They have to live in a constant state of threat. And they use that for their religion. Terrorists are a perfect example. They live out of fear because, Allah has said that the infidels must die, and they are, We could get into why that happened. There's a whole reason behind that, which a lot of you wouldn't want to hear, but I won't get into that today. It's also behind, everything that's happening on the world stage. It's all coming out of fear, and the people who are most afraid are the people who have a lot of money. And the people who have a lot of money don't want to lose that money. This is why, gosh, I hesitate this. But maybe I'll get into more deeper later. But when it comes to conspiracy theories, if you really want to understand how to find out when something is really a conspiracy, you ask yourself one simple question. What is the money relationship? And who stands to lose monetarily? And let me just throw out a name. What was the name of those guys? Anyway, maybe I'm not meant to say it. If you can follow the trail of money, and you can see, not because there's a rumor, by the way, the Illuminati, who is the Illuminati? You can't bank it. An actual company, a corporation, a person with a name who we know has a ton of money. Let me give you an easy example. You've got Apple and you've got Microsoft, right? Who's the guy who created Microsoft? Back in the 80s and the 90s, there was a big battle to keep Apple out of Microsoft's monopoly. And so that is a very clear path. That guy had a ton of money, and he had a monopoly on the industry. And it was really clear that we could say there was a conspiracy to keep Apple out of whatever, because Microsoft and the guy who owned it wanted to keep their money. That is an example of an easy to follow money trail. Who has an easy to follow money trail? Oil companies. Nobody can deny that the oil companies have a lot of money at stake keeping us using fossil fuels. The drug industry. Nobody can deny that there is an easy money trail to the hospitals and to drug companies keeping people sick in order to keep them taking medication. That is an easy to follow money trail. Let me give you another example. I do not recommend that anybody get a flu shot. And this comes not because of any conspiracy, although there is one. But I was recently listening to a scientist who creates vaccines. This is a scientist who creates vaccines, and he was saying it's impossible to make a flu vaccine. They are guessing. They're taking the flu from the year before, and they're trying to create a vaccine. First off, it takes years and years of study to find out if a vaccine works. You got to study it, and they're introducing a new vaccine every year for an unknown virus. I heard about a woman who was in the hospital with both types of the flu, and she had taken a vaccine, and it didn't prevent her from getting both types of the flu at the same time. It threw her in the emergency room. But the CDC, you watch television, And the first thing they'll say is that the only real prevention for the flu is to take the flu vaccine. Why is that? Because the CDC has connected to the drug companies. There is a money trail. So you can see the money trail. If you cannot see the money trail, that is a good sign that it is a bogus conspiracy theory. Nobody benefits from talking about global warming. There is no there's no governmental agency, there is no company, there is no, rich person that is gaining money from explaining to you that we live in global warming. But there is an absolute money trail that you can follow to the oil companies, and they have a vested interest in telling you that it's a conspiracy theory. Global warming is fake news. It's a conspiracy theory. Of those two, who benefits financially? If you choose to reject global warming, you put money into the oil companies. You don't put money into anybody's pocket, although they tell you that somebody's making money, but you can't really find that, who those people are. If they're saying, that there's a thing called global warming. And I find it interesting that people who are so into the fear-based thinking and so into conspiracies, that would be one. Global warming would be an actual conspiracy that says, listen, we need to be afraid of this. But they reject the real fear for aliens on the moon who are using archons to pull your soul out through your chakras. And those goddamn liberals trying to tell me that I can't drive my car and shoot my gun. Right? That's what I mean. It's living in fear makes you a target, and it makes you. The last thing I'll say is this: the most important reason is because living in fear keeps you emotionally immature. And when you are emotionally immature, it is impossible to evolve spiritually. If what you want is to evolve spiritually, achieve enlightenment, whatever that is, if you want to escape the matrix, if you want to escape reincarnation, the first thing that you should be looking for is having emotional maturity. The one thing you can do to have emotional maturity is to feel your feelings without taking actions on them or reacting to them or stuffing them down. Just simply having them. That means your fear, your anger, your sadness, your hopelessness, your happiness. Some people are afraid of happiness. I've caught myself being afraid of being happy a lot, because if I'm happy, then I'm going to get shot down. Being afraid to be in love. The real reason for that, I lost my fiance, the only woman I've ever known who I would consider to be my soulmate. I lost her. It was horrifically painful. It'd be incredibly easy for me to say I'm never going to love again because I don't want to feel like that. I'm not going to do that. How stupid. I want to enjoy my life. All right, so I've done a lot of babbling and all that kind of crap. So I'll check to see if there are any questions, and then we'll wrap this up. I don't see any questions here. Let's see. Nope. No questions. All right, my friends. So that's it for me for today. Let us go over the list again and take a look at yourself and see where you land on these lists. Okay, that's it for me today, my friends. Maybe you'll see me again this weekend if I can get through all of the work that I have to do. Thank you. And do I have any news? Do I have any business I got to do? If you want an astrological reading from me, which will help you see which planets are working to empower you, if you want to take a look at your Aruda, which is the most important thing to your success. See, I'm going to sell you something right now. If you don't understand your Aruda, you could be sabotaging your own success out of your own fear-based ego. Looking at what the Aruda is incredibly helpful, which is I also call the projection, because it shows you exactly how the world wants to see you. For instance, I am the shamanic warrior. That is my Aruda. So I wear this costume. I wear these, all this fancy stuff, and I wear this, and I wear that, and I lift weights, and a sleeveless shirt, and a bald head, because I'm the shamanic warrior. That's how people want to see me. If I dressed in a suit and tried to do the same thing, I would not get nearly the positive response that I do now. I am allowing my projection to come out, even though I feel it's kind of silly. But that's how people see me. That's how they want to see me. Do you know how you are being seen? Because if you are able to pinpoint that and empower that, you are now allowing yourself to achieve success. Because when the world sees you the way they want to see you, not how you see yourself, but how they see you, they want to give you success. So it's the most powerful thing. So go to astrology.thunderwizard.com. If you need counseling, if you don't know what it is that you want to do with your life, I say if you know what your soul desire is and you go after it, you never have to worry about money or anything or ever again. A lot of people, when I ask them, what is it you really want to do, they don't know. Get a session with me at career.thunderwizard.com. If you want to learn astrology from me, and I'm just about wrapping up, getting ready to wrap up the last part of the certification course, and you want to start your own astrology business, the way that I do it, go to astrologycertification.thunderwizard.com. For all of my books, go to michaelwilliamdenny.com. Denny is spelled D-E-N-N-E-Y. To see all of my DVDs, go to videos.michaelwilliamdenny.com. There, I think I've done all of my advertising. You can also, the best way to support this and to learn is to go to thunderwizard.com and sign up at the $25 level, and you get access to all of the private videos where I teach you from A to Z the power of true shamanic ritual, runes, the 9 worlds, all that kind of good stuff. All right, so that's it for me today, my friends. I look forward to talking to you guys again, maybe later on this week. All right, bye-bye.